Jekyll discussing the issue of multicultural psychology research. It's February 28th, 2014. Multicultural psychology is the inclusion in the area of the study of psychology where human behavior has been limited to gender, race, or other quantifiable data categorizations, such as religion, as another example. The area of sociology has often researched how groups of similar category identifications behave, but while only in the group setting. Psychology has historically prioritized the results of the individual behaviors in its study. The historical research of psychology, the recordings of the research, find limits of any multicultural inclusion, and these are evidenced by the results of the research. The question we need to ask about multicultural psychology is how can we advance concerns for multicultural research enhancement in psychology without taking away from the culture itself. One absolute fact is humans have brains. This is an absolute that we often find not available to us in scientific study. Culture is an environmental element, according to Pierce, 2004. Research conducted for the USA Government National Institute of Health states advancement in molecular biology shows us that genetics separated by race alone plays an insignificant measurable role in human development. In another issue, gender, as a classification, holds different physical attributes and biological contrasts, such as reproductive organs. Men and women are different. While a choice of deity or spiritual disposition, also related to cultures, is most likely influenced by nurture or learned behavior, and is not exclusive to any biological mandate. There are a couple philosophical questions that arise. How and why are inclusion, even if it means the change of an individual self for no other reason than acceptability, the correct setting that we want to do when advancing the study of individual behaviors? Do we understand culture by inclusion? Does this guarantee an acceptability of that individual's behavior? We look to two of our experts discussing this field. John Smith, a counselor, a social worker in a downtown metropolitan area, and Jill Jones, a medical doctor in psychiatry, who has a private practice in the suburbs of the same city. John believes that emotions, such as fear, is an element of multicultural exclusion. He bases this assessment on his practice-based evidence. John uses this assessment because his position is typically dealing with the same people the same days, generally people that have performed poorly or done something wrong and have been sent to him by an authoritative figure. From a social perspective, John, as an expert, believes fear has placed limits on understandings and acceptability of cultures. Some of these fears are specific fears, such as the fear of crime, which will limit social relationships. This has been outlined by the American Journal of Public Health, stating fear of crime may be a barrier to participation in health-promoting physical initiatives. We fear what we do not understand is also a belief that John states. His practice-based evidence, when he discusses why people that are afraid from the statistical data that supports crime is higher in inner city than anywhere else in any state, is supportive of the aspect that people are afraid to socialize with things that they feel might do them harm. So, is this an environmental issue or is this a cultural issue? John posits that anyone that lives there does so will succumb to the same exact pressures of any other individual that lives there. While if living elsewhere, you would mimic the same type of behaviors. There is some research to back this theory up. However, is it possible that you live where you want to live? That's a question that we must ask. John believes that research into cultural exchanges cannot ignore elements of specific to any culture. One may view cultures in a caste system of high and low importance. Economic factors certainly play a role in the kids in the suburb versus the kids in the inner city. But this is not always the case. as economic importance is the ability to do what you want to do. If you're in an area doing what you want to do, how are you not economically sound? So the psychology of behavior becomes relative to the self-efficacy of one's desires. Jill, however, bases her practice from a belief that empirical data is the strongest of indicators that she may use. Jill understands that from her medical experience that variables such as brain size, inherent genetic markers, predispositions of traits, for among others, can alter learning abilities and social standings within any culture. Jill points to a recent movie as an anecdotal example. In the movie The 300, we see a culture of warriors in the Spartans. Yet one significant person was left out of this warrior class because of a biological deficiency, a disability, if you will. This disability made this individual act in a different manner, or was it the lack of social acceptance that made this person act in a different manner? They both were raised in the same culture, the warrior king and the outcast. However, the culture in and of itself provided for differences in their perceptions and context of life. In such, does this alter a person's behavior? Jill, as an established medical professional with decades of practice using this empirical data, understands that a utopian ideology is strong in heuristic value, but it also remains weak in practical value. A culture, be it related to geography, religion, or race, and even gender in some of the discussions about culture, albeit, as we discussed, gender holds a significant biological difference in functionality, thereby it being the only element of culture that is not derived by choice. Jill believes culture is about self-efficacy, and that self-discovery is where culture diversity is lacking. Identification of a specific culture is not an innate element in any human. Since humans as a species can make these choices of their own free will, and you apply an understanding of the stages of development and conditioned nature, Jill will point out to the abnormal distinctions in human behavior. Certain cultures practice cannibalism. Others practice genital mutilation. Others practice pedophilia and or marriages of young. Others practice sexism so bad that they murder women and disfigure them by torturous means. Others still practice polygamy. Others will practice just an absence of technology. And many, many, many various cultures practice specific deity mandates that could even include self-destructive practices. So by what inclusion and what dictates abnormal behavior? How are these justified in an acceptability under the banner of cultural diversity? If we diminish the preservation of life and the benefits of knowledge that have increased the human species as a whole, then according to the Journal of Healthcare for the Underserved and Poor, which states cultural humility is proposed as a more suitable goal in multicultural medical education. Jill, as an expert, agrees that without recognizing our own cultural failures within our own cultures, that we cannot feasibly research or modify behaviors that will ever be accepted by that individual culture or the individuals within the culture. Remember, psychology is the study of the individual. Psychology is not the study of the culture. That is sociology. Therefore, greater distinctions will outweigh greater inclusions. Inclusion of all multicultural facets only becomes the norm if we are able to accept the differences in behaviors based on these cultural differences as a standard. So a utilitarian approach is better than a utopian desire here. Will you tolerate women getting stoned to death in your street on the basis of another culture accepts it? Or will you provide that that is abnormal behavior and should not be tolerated? These are questions that are not going to be answered just by including various cultures in all the study. They will still hold a difference. If you change the ideology of the culture, then is it not true that you, in and of itself, change the culture? How can you change specifics of a culture without changing the entire culture? John believes that fear matters. People are similar. inclusion is the key. Jill believes people are different. Self-efficacy and choices are what rule the day. Standards of acceptability must be set if we are to find any way of inclusion of all cultures into any establishment of a norm. The two of them together find similarity in one thought. Multicultural inclusion reduces the specific culture of any individual study. Thank you. We appreciate you taking the time to read our presentation, and we encourage the effort to establish standards and a way to include all people and all cultures in studies that relate to individual human behaviors.